about this? How about that? There we go. Looking better. Everybody. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Well, it's a little dark in here. I think I have... Maybe should turn up my light a little bit. Hold on. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to turn up my lights. I'll let you watch. Hey, much better. We're talking. Yeah, this is a cheap operation, but the quality is in the sipping. Sure, it's low production quality, bad sound, terrible lighting, sketchy video quality, but we have something that the other live streams do not have. You can watch MSNBC all night long, and you won't get this. You can watch CNN for decades and not get this. It's called the simultaneous sip, and all you need is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything, including the frickin' pandemic, better. Go. Yeah. So, one of the scariest things in the world is something called the unknown. The unknown can be really scary, especially if your enemy is invisible. You literally can't even see it. So if you don't know where it's going and you can't see it, well, that's the scariest possibility in the world. So, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to call on my decades of business and life experience to tell you where this is all going. Are you ready? So I'm going to describe what the next several weeks look like, and you get to see how close I am. And it looks like this. So we've got this big fight, if you will, between the people who say it's way too extreme to close the economy, and make this as short as possible, send us back to work, people are going to die, but it's better than crashing the economy. I would say that's an adult decision or an adult opinion. Whether you agree with it, whether you disagree with it, I do respect it because it demonstrates an understanding of the costs and an understanding of the benefits. They're hard to measure, so it could be wrong or it could be right because we don't know how big either of those sides are. But it's an adult decision because it understands both the costs and the potential benefits. So I always appreciate anybody who can see the whole field. But that doesn't mean that tells us what to do. And then there are the others who say, close it down until this virus is really under control. And we don't know how long that could take. And you're hearing scary kind of numbers like, weeks, months. And we say to ourselves quite reasonably, how could we survive that long with a crashed economy? So let me tell you what's actually going to happen. And it won't be one of those two things. Greg Gutfeld always says, and I'm always nodding my head at home when he says it, about trapped in the prison of two ideas. And we've sort of accidentally done that. Aren't you thinking to yourself that there are two conditions? Probably, right? You've been sort of pushed into two camps and forgetting all the middle ground. So the two camps are open the economy or close the economy. And you're thinking, well, those are our two options. They are not, nor are either of them what's going to happen. So let me tell you what's going to happen. This is based entirely on just experience. I hate to say common sense because I don't like the term. Because good judgment is not very common. But I'm going to describe it, and then the challenge is to you to tell me why I'm wrong. Because I think you're going to watch it materialize right in front of you this way. All right, so here are the variables, and then I'll tell you why you can fairly easily predict where this is going, and fairly quickly. Number one, I'm gonna get out in front of the medical professionals. If you wanna know what's true, listen to the medical professionals. I'm not one of them. So if I give you more optimism about a medical situation, listen to the professionals for actual accurate information. But also be aware that the medical professionals are managing not just your health, but availability of supply. And they're managing your mental state, your anxiousness, they're managing crowd psychology. They're managing a lot of variables. So if they give you a straight fact, in normal times, I'd say to myself, well, it comes from the experts. I'm gonna take that straight fact as just being a straight fact. But I don't think you can do that today. Now, I want to be very careful in what I'm saying. I believe our medical professionals, the people in charge, do have the right intentions. They have the most information. They're the most qualified. Everything they're doing is for the greater good. But we on this periscope can, if we choose, to have a deeper insight into what's happening, because I think we're smart enough, and frankly there aren't enough of us to make a difference anyway, but I think we're smart enough to be able to see what's really going on. So let me tell you what I think is really going on. There are now, my understanding, this subject to fact checking, is that there are now 3 studies showing that chloroquine in particular, and the stronger version, hydroxychloroquine, or whatever it is, in combination with erythromycin, or whatever, and there's names of drugs that I can't pronounce. By the way, are you impressed that President Trump can pronounce those drugs perfectly? I was watching for that when he talks, and he kind of perfectly pronounces them. And then you watch the news reporters try to pronounce them, and it gets funny because some can and some can't. But I don't know, I want to see Joe Biden try to pronounce the names of these drugs. It's a serious, completely seriously, because it is one of those tells for mental acuity, and I'm wondering if I've lost it myself because I have trouble with those words. But the president doesn't seem to. I don't know. I mean, it's the smallest little data point in the world, and it made me wonder how much he practiced. Didn't you? When you saw him effortlessly saying those big medical words, did you say to yourself, how long did he practice? Or is he just sort of good at it? I don't know the answer to that. He might just be good at it. But I would imagine he practiced a little bit. I certainly did, and it didn't help me a bit. So here's where things are going. And so my first statement of fact is that I'm more optimistic than let's say, Fauci and the CDC on the usefulness of these drugs, such as chloroquine. And I'll just use that as my placeholder for those other drugs that are also useful, and I guess they're taken in combination mostly. I think that the reason that the doctors are downplaying it is to keep you home, because that's good, right? At the moment, keeping you home is a big deal, and because they don't have a supply yet. Now, I'm sure that somebody says, stop rambling, old man. Well, we can save you. You're gone. I think that the professionals are trying to strike a balance between panicking and people, murdering people to get a supply of the drug, and being optimistic. Here's my belief. All right? It's my belief. This is not what the medical professionals are saying. My belief is that they're striking a balance and that they know this stuff is better than they're letting on. Because all of the evidence so far is it's a pretty good kill shot if you get it early enough and you're not at death's door. And even if you're at death's door, some of these are looking pretty strong. All right, so here's what's going to happen. We are going to learn that we can take the death rate for a normal, healthy, let's say people under 60, people with no underlying conditions. I believe that within a week, we will be able to say with a fair degree of confidence that if you can get them the chloroquine and drugs when symptoms present, and you're under 60 and there's nothing else special going on with you health-wise, I believe we're going to drive that very close to zero. And we'll probably know that in a week, based on other places in the world doing similar things, etc. So in a week, let's say we know that if you're healthy and under 60, you could get sick, you'll probably get sick, half of people will get sick, maybe more, but your odds of dying approach zero. Then you can start letting people go back to work, but not everybody. So here's my prediction. We will be turning the economy back on, but not like a light switch. It's going to be like a dimmer. The first people who get to go back to work are the young, who live somewhere where the healthcare system is not overloaded. That's important too. Young, healthcare system is not overloaded and not predicted to be overloaded right away. And they have a sufficient amount of the chloroquine and related drugs. And here's the next thing I think is going to happen. I asked this question, and I'll look for the answers on Twitter, but I asked the medical experts this question: how practical is it to administer the chloroquine and the other meds for people who have a non-critical infection? Or even if they're just presenting symptoms, but you don't know if it's regular flu or old flu or regular cold. But just let's say you didn't do any testing. This is just hypothetical. Let's say you've got lots of meds, because I think you can make them quicker than you can make test kits. And it's easier to give a med than to give a test. So I think you're going to see pop-up tents in the vicinity of hospitals or maybe other places. You probably want to be close to a hospital, sort of within walking distance of a hospital with your pop-up tent, because somebody's going to walk in there with a worst case and they should have gone to the emergency room, so you need to get them there quickly. So I think what you're going to see is, especially in California and in other places as the weather warms, it's going to be tent-worthy weather. And we're going to see pop-up tents with people who are just dispensing the meds to people who are not so sick that they really need to be in the intensive care. So the first thing I think is that our ability to deliver it to people who are not critically ill will be very high. So there's your back to work program. I think in a week, maybe two, we're going to have really solid risk-reward information about these meds. At that point, the government is going to start turning the knob, but it's not going to be a switch. It's going to be, okay, in these places, these kinds of people, in these jobs, go back to work. Take the restaurants, for example, the restaurant business. You could easily imagine that restaurants would be approved for work under the following conditions: nobody under 60 in the restaurant, right? Now, if you take the people over 60 out of the restaurant consumer business, you lose a lot of money, because people over 60 are a big, big, big part of the restaurant business everywhere. But could you get them up to getting close to meeting the rent just by saying, if your servers are 20-somethings and you limit your customers to under 60, and you spread out the tables, let's give it a try. Maybe not in New York City, but maybe in Toledo. So in other words, if you're thinking it's a light switch, economy on, economy off, you're dead wrong. It's not going to be that. It's going to be a phased test. It's going to happen fairly rapidly, and we might test some things and pull back. Say, oh, we tried it in Toledo, but Toledo got out of control, pull back. And that's how we're going to beat this thing. Now, let's talk about Rachel Maddow and all the bad reporting. This is what Rachel Maddow said yesterday. This is a quote. But the president loves saying things like, quote, there's a drug we've got and it's very effective. It's approved already. Everybody's going to get it, unquote. He loves saying things like that because that would be a lovely thing to be able to tell people. Unless, of course, that's not true. In which case, telling people a fairy tale like that is cruel and harmful and needlessly diverting and wildly irresponsible. from anyone in a leadership role, Maddow said. Now, so Maddow is saying that it's a lie that we have a drug that's very effective and that it's approved already. So what would the press say about that? Would the press say, yes, Rachel Maddow, you got him now. Good point, Rachel. It's that we don't have any effective approved drugs. All right. Well, Rachel Maddow, please explain the following observation. So since our press has largely failed us, and I think you could say that, I'm seeing some good reports. Joel Pollack is doing, great stuff, actual sort of sourcing stuff from real people in the real world instead of just talking to politicians and seeing what their dumb quotes are. So most of the news is just resorted to listening to people and then telling you what they said. And it's only the people who volunteer to talk, politicians. But any real investigative stuff is woefully lacking. And I did something for you, okay? I'm going to tell you something that the news won't tell you because I know it. I have a direct knowledge of this fact that I'm going to tell you. As of yesterday, actually just hours ago, last night, a patient who had all the symptoms, and I think by now has been confirmed to have coronavirus, and it's somebody who knows exactly how they got it. In other words, it's not somebody who just suddenly had symptoms and, well, I think I have it. It was somebody who had close contact with somebody who had it. They had all the symptoms, just classic, the tight chest, the dry cough, the whole thing. Went to the emergency room, and I got to follow the whole path. So I was sort of in close contact because it's a friend. And there was like an immense wait at the emergency room. I think it was an hours-long wait. But when he got in, he was almost immediately put on chloroquine. Now, I know that personally because I heard it from the person. Like actually just hours ago, a real patient went into a real hospital and got chloroquine. Rachel Maddow says this is not true. She says that the president loves saying that there's a drug we've got, it's very effective, and it's approved already. I can confirm that medical professionals are giving people this drug. And do you think they're giving it to people because they don't think it works? Do you think it's just, well, we don't know, just guessing? Just guessing? No, the medical professionals are pretty damn sure this works, and at the very least, it's not harmful. I mean, it's a well-tolerated, well-understood drug, especially in short-term doses, which this would be. It's the long-term stuff that even has any side effects at all. So, Rachel Maddow, what does it mean when you say it's not approved? Well, let me explain this. Approval is not approval. Again, trapped in the prison of two ideas, the Gutfeld frame on things. She's believing that a drug can be either approved or not approved. And that's just wrong. It's just wrong. You can have a drug that's approved for something else and used off-label. You can have it used, there's a compassionate use clause. I don't know how liberal that is. Imagine you go into a hospital and you say, there are 3 known studies that show that this drug is super effective and has basically nothing to worry about in terms of side effects. You go into the hospital and you say that. Can I get that drug? Because I'm coughing, I got the coronavirus, I got the COVID-19. I could be dead in a few days without this drug. Do you think the hospital is going to say, in this current situation, do you think the hospital is going to say, I don't know, it doesn't look dire enough? No. If they have the drug, they're going to give it to you right away. There's no question about it. The doctor is not going to say, I don't know, let's learn a bit more about this. I don't know if this will quite fit into that off-label use. I'm not sure if it's a compassionate use. No, nothing like that's happening in the real world. In the real world, this drug is approved. Oh, is it technically approved in the sense that the FDA has said you can use it for this and here's the exact dosage regimen? No. No, my understanding is that, unless it happened recently, my understanding is it's not approved in that very technical, specific way. But do the doctors know what regimen to use? Yes, because the other countries tried things and they just told them and then they tried it and it worked. So yeah, there may be some more ideal regimen, but we do know what it is. I just saw it twice on Twitter. If I know what the regimen is, well, doctors know. I mean, I'm not sure I'm right, but the information seems to be widely available based on the experience of other countries. So Rachel Maddow, you are just lying to the country. You are just lying, and this is a despicable lie. It's not like what you accuse the president of doing. What you're accusing the president of doing is maybe something that's technically in some word and legal way you could define it as untrue. But in the real world, if you've got the coronavirus, Rachel Maddow, and you drive into your local emergency room, Rachel Maddow, they're going to give you the drug that you just told the world isn't approved and isn't effective. Now again, I'm not guessing. I just followed somebody with the frickin' coronavirus, digitally anyway, all the way into the emergency room and then got a picture of the actual IV in the arm and asked what's in there. And at least some of the stuff that's in there was the chloroquine, but I think there was a cocktail in there. There's no doubt that the thing is approved in the real world sense. You go into your emergency room, you're going to get the frickin' drug. That's it. Don't even think that that's not going to happen. That's happening. That's the fact right now. Rachel Maddow, this is one of the most destructive. It almost seems intentional because, I've said this before. Whatever you think of Rachel Maddow's, her performance, her act, her politics, anything else, the one thing you can't question is she's super smart, right? Nobody says she's dumb. I mean, even to do this job, if you watch her for 5 minutes, you could hate everything she says and still come away thinking, well, you're really smart. That's the impression I always get, is like she's really good at her job. She's really smart. Does she not know this distinction? Because I know it, and I would have to guess that if Rachel Maddow took, some kind of standardized tests, like if I competed with her for the SATs, I think she'd beat me. If we took a test of just knowledge, just how much do you know about, the world, I think she'd beat me. And I know this. Are you telling me she doesn't know that anybody can get this drug because doctors are going to be kind of flexible in the emergency situation? Does she really not know that? I don't know. I don't want to be the guy who reads a mind and says, oh, no, you're lying intentionally, because we could easily be in this cognitive dissonance situation where she wants it to be true that he lied. Other people said he lied. It just feels right, so she went with it. But I don't know. I don't know how you could be that smart and that dumb at the same time, but I guess that's a question. I saw yet another report from somebody who turned one ventilator into many with a combination of creative hosing and attachments. So I guess the ventilator engine, if you will, is powerful enough to operate multiple hoses if you rig up the attachments, and that's happening now. So we've seen two different mechanisms for doing that. They're probably both good. And I thought I saw that somebody turned one into 9 or something, or 2 into 9. Whatever it is, it's a multiple. So that's good news. Let's talk about the economic harm versus the medical harm. There's a raging debate, and it fascinates me. Most of the time, when there's a debate and there are people on either side, I find myself either strongly siding with one side, and then I'll look at, okay, who are the people on my side? And I'll look at the ones on my side, and I'll go, oh, okay, smart person. Phew, I'm on the right side. All right, who's on the other side? Okay, dumb person, been wrong about everything. Okay, I feel safe. So whenever I'm in the company of being in the same opinion of people I consider the smartest, wisest, most informed people, I feel comfortable. I am not comfortable at the moment because there are smart people I respect, and who, if I hear they disagree with me, I don't reflexively say, well, why are they wrong? I reflexively say, oh God, I might be wrong this time. And there are people saying, smart people, that we've gone too far closing the economy and we should open it back up, and we should do it pretty soon and just take what's coming. It's going to be, there's going to be death, there's going to be problems, but it's better to have an operating economy. So I'd like to talk to that question, open the economy or not. Now, you heard my opinion that we will be opening the economy. I'm guessing on the outside, 2 weeks from now, you should see a phased reopening. And phased would be the key word, because as soon as you see motion in the right direction, it's going to change entirely how you feel about it. I think we'll be hiding the people who are older and have underlying conditions. We'll get much better at hiding them. Oh, and by the way, there is some early indication, far short of being confirmed, that it's actually pretty hard to get it from casual contact. So there's not a lot of evidence that people are getting it from just say, going to the store and shopping with somebody who has it. So I'm not telling you that's safe. So let me be very careful. The virus apparently lives on surfaces for a long time. So in the laboratory and scientifically and logically, you can get it, just being in a place where somebody else has it. But there does seem to be two factors at play here. One is that we can't confirm a lot of that has happened. So every time we know where it came from, it seems to be close contact. You're part of a ventilation system. It's your spouse. You can usually determine there's some kind of pretty close, intensive contact. But we don't actually have much, if any, evidence that somebody went to the hardware store and got it when they bought a hammer. I'm just going to use a crazy example, right? So there's no evidence that somebody just was away from everybody who had it, went to the store, bought a hammer, somebody else had touched the hammer, and now they got the coronavirus. Could happen, theoretically, but the evidence is that it's sort of not. So could you protect, under those conditions, do we know enough to protect the people who are vulnerable? And I'd say yes. It seems like it's entirely about getting them away from other people, and only about getting them away from intensive interactions. So if somebody needs to deliver some food, relative needs to stand in the doorway and say hi, seems perfectly safe, relative to the rest of the world, which is an unsafe place. So here's another thing that you should consider. The total close down, or whatever you want to call it at the current situation, whatever this is, we probably want to take this as close as we can to the edge of destruction before we change, right? So if we're doing this right, it should look worse and worse and worse until it looks so bad we think we're going to lose the entire economy. And right there, right at that point where all the smart people say, okay, if you go one more inch, if you let this go on one more day, I don't know if we can get back. That's the day that we'll start getting back. Because that's the day the cost-benefit analysis just becomes obvious. At the moment, smart people are disagreeing where's just the right balance? Is it too soon, too late? Smart people, are going to be sort of disagreeing. But there will be a point when things become so dire that it looks like, okay, we can't do one more day. We got to take the risk. Let's get back to work. I believe that it makes sense to take it right up to that line. It makes sense to get pretty close to the line. So you are going to get a lot more scared before you start feeling comfortable. So that's just what to expect. But that means we're doing it right, okay? The proper strategy should bring it as close to the edge, but not over the edge, to the extent that we can determine what that edge is. And I think we can, actually. Because we have a situation where nothing's broken. It's more like, can people get food? And, we'll know what the edge looks like. But I think we're going to go right up to the darkest point in civilization. And then we're going to say, stop. And then we're going to start moving the other way. But all of that is going to buy us time to get the distribution of these drugs, which, in my opinion, are super effective and would be enough to get at least the under 60s back to work. Once the under 60s are back to work, you're going to be at about maybe 60% efficiency in your economy fairly quickly. All of the over 60s spend a lot of money. They go to restaurants, and drive around and buy gas and stuff. So you're not going to be fully back, but it is worth noting that the people who are not going to work first are the same group or at least likely to have a job, the elderly. All right. There will be a time when the baby boomers are called upon. So I'm in that category of baby boomer. And my generation, I think it's 1946 to 64. If you were born in that, you're a boomer. We are most, except for the few people lingering who are in the greatest generation. I mean, they're in their 90s. There aren't too many of them. But mostly the people at risk are the boomers. And the boomers will be called upon for sacrifice. Because if you ask me what's best for me, well, I might want the economy closed down a little extra long compared to you, because that will keep me a little extra safe because I'm over 60, I have an underlying condition, asthma. And so what's best for me personally would be a longer close down, just to really, really get a handle on this thing. What's best for the rest of you, people who are younger and have less, death risk, what's best for you is to get back to work fairly quickly. So you and I, anybody who's young and out of work right now, your interests and mine are not aligned. Your best interest and my best interest just don't match. So something's got to give, right? So either you have to not work, you being a 30-year-old who's out of work right now, or I have to take a greater risk of dying. And the people in my category have to take a greater risk of dying. So how do we get the economy working when some big group is going to have to take a big risk? And here's what I'm here to tell you. I can't speak on behalf of all boomers, of course, or on behalf of anybody. But I can tell you I'll take the risk. When my government tells me, okay, young people, it's safe enough for you because we have good drugs and we've ramped up our tents where you can get quick treatment and everything. It's safe enough for you, but you boomers are going to be a lot less safe now because everybody else is out in the world and spreading it around. I'm here to tell you I'm signing up for that risk. All right, and I'm in a riskier category, probably not the riskiest or close to it, but I'm raising my hand. I don't know if you'll find too many people in my generation, the boomers, who will not raise their hand for this. There will be a time that your leader is going to call on you to take a risk, an outsized risk, one that isn't absolutely necessary, but pretty necessary. So if you're wondering what the boomers will do or how we will respond to this, I got good news for you. We're a pretty strong bunch. We boomers, maybe the young folks can't quite understand what it's like to be my age. Let me tell you, young people, I have maybe a third of the people watching this are pretty young, based on my stats. Let me tell you something. When you're my age, you've seen some stuff. And my age has seen some stuff that maybe you can't even imagine. I've had every childhood disease. I've had measles twice, mumps, chicken pox. I beat those. And if I need to get something else that takes me, takes me out for a few weeks, I'll probably be fine because of the meds. But if I have to take that risk, I'm signing up for it right now. So your boomers are way tougher than you think. Mentally, not physically, but mentally, and in terms of their patriotism and their willingness to take a risk, the boomers are going to step up, and you should expect that. So expect your boomers to take that risk so the rest of you can go back to work, and I'd like to go first. When the time, it's not yet right. I think we have to wait at least a week. 2 weeks at the outside is my best guess before we start phasing young people back with the support of the medical system that can keep them healthy at a rapid response if needed. Almost there, 2 weeks at max. 93% of the people who say they have symptoms turn out to be negative. I don't know how to process that, but let me ask you this. How many of you have convinced yourselves that sometime in the last 3 months you actually had the coronavirus? Because you had that weird illness, that weird cough, that cold, that fever, those aches that didn't seem like anything else? Because I'm in that category, right? Because if I look at my last 3 months, I think to myself, there was like 2 weeks there where my whole body ached and I seemed feverish and like it just didn't feel like anything else I've ever experienced. And do I believe that I actually have been infected with the coronavirus? Well, 93% of the people with symptoms are negative. So I'm going to play the odds. Probably not. Probably not. Somebody says age 66. Me too. Age 63. Watch the comments. Watch the comments from the boomers. The boomers are ready to save your life. I'll just put it right there. The boomers are ready to enter the breach. We just need the word. I don't think the boomers are going to go first. We're going to wait for our leaders to say, now's the time for you to take an outside risk. You're going to do it for the young. That's exactly who we'd do it for. We'd be doing it for the young, or ourselves as well. But the moment our leader asks for that, the boomers will give it to you. All right. I'm complaining on Twitter today, and I'll complain here about our press again. Why don't we know more about the availability of the chloroquine and the other meds? Here's what I'd like to know, and I'd like to know by the end of the day, because this is vitally important to the mental health of the country. It's one thing to say, well, we might have a solution, it might be coming, but it's completely different feeling if you say, we need this many pills, we have this much already, that'll help us with the most important cases. By the end of 2 weeks, we'll have so many pills you're drowning in them. And then that's when we do the pop-up tents, and that's when we just go nuts on this thing. I need to kind of know what the pipeline looks like, not just for the chloroquine, but the related drugs that are in the cocktails they're using. Why can't my press tell me that? Why isn't that? I mean, for me, it comes down to one question, 2 questions. There are 2 questions. One is, what is the survival rate of people who got these drugs on time in the United States? I think it's going to be close to 0 for people who don't have some other health condition. I need to know that. And then I need to know what is the availability pipeline. If you can tell me those 2 things, and I think the answers are going to be good, or at least heading good, which is almost as good, I'm going to feel a lot better. Now is Boomer Normandy. Yeah, I've thought of that analogy myself. It's like every generation gets to storm the beaches at Normandy. It just looks different. The greatest generation literally stormed the beaches of Normandy in a hail of bullets, ripping them apart. Did it anyway. Saved the world. We boomers are going to be asked to take a little risk. It's not nearly the risk of Normandy, of course, or anywhere near it, but it's going to be a risk, and we will take that beach. All right. Joe Biden is, apparently Joe Biden's campaign, they had a meeting and they were thinking, well, what can we do during this time of crisis when we can't campaign as effectively? So they came up with a plan, and I assume that I wasn't in the room, but I assume the conversation went something like this. What is the dumbest, least productive, most destructive thing we could do? I assume that's what they were trying to decide, because they came up with a winner. And the idea is that Joe Biden is going to have shadow briefings on coronavirus to show how well he would have handled the crisis compared to all that lying and failure from President Trump. Now, it almost sounds like I'm joking, doesn't it? Because isn't that the worst idea you've ever heard? I mean, of all the ideas that anybody's had since the beginning of the coronavirus, some are right, some are wrong, but this might be the worst idea of all the ideas, medically, politically, strategically, philosophically, empathetically, on every level. This might be the worst idea I've ever heard. Because do you know what the country needs less than having a shadow president lower our confidence in our actual leader? Ooh, that's the last thing we need. The only thing that's worse than that is actually getting coronavirus. I can't even think of a dumber thing to do. So I've rebranded this as the shadow of his former self briefings. So Joe Biden is a shadow of his former self. So if he's giving a shadow briefing, let's just fill in the blanks. It's a shadow of his former self briefing. And I think this shows in this example, because let me ask you this. Do you think young Joe Biden, in better control of his faculties, would have made this decision? Do you think he would have? This feels like a staff decision from somebody who isn't good at decisions. It might be the very worst idea I've ever seen in the history of all politics. Nothing about this is good. And they're good. I don't know. Will they do it anyway? I think maybe they'll get talked out of it. My guess is that by the time they get the technology up so he could do it, I guess they're waiting to turn his house into a studio or something. But by the time they can do it, I think smart people will talk them out of it. I think the adults in the room, the David Axelrods. If you're David Axelrod and you just read this, and I think Axelrod, is one of the smart people in the room, right? If you're talking politics and strategy and campaigns, you want David Axelrod on your team, and one of the best. Do you think when he heard this, that Joe Biden was going to do shadow briefings to confuse the country on coronavirus? Do you think Axelrod said, whoa, good move, Joe Biden? No, I'm not a mind reader, so maybe he did. Who knows, right? I can't determine it. But do you think, you've watched him, right? Even if you disagree with all of the politics of David Axelrod, is there anybody here who thinks he's dumb? No. There's not one person here who thinks David Axelrod doesn't know exactly what he's talking about. He's at the top of his game, as informed and smart as you could ever be in this category. Let's ask him what he thinks. I assume he'll probably be on one of the news shows in the next few days. Wait for David Axelrod to tell you what he thinks about Joe Biden doing shadow briefings in the middle of an emergency. Honestly, it's the worst idea I've ever seen. And I'm not even joking. It's the worst idea I've ever seen. There are bad ideas, but you can't find one worse than this. And on top of that, the things that Joe Biden thinks are lies are because he doesn't understand it. I just explained that Rachel Maddow, who's about 1,000 times smarter than Biden, anybody would agree with that. Rachel Maddow didn't know that there's this distinction, between approved specifically and okay to use approved that way. She didn't know the distinction. Do you think Joe Biden knows that distinction? I don't know, maybe. Who knows? All right. CNN is reporting that they're stunned, I tell you, by Trump's totally ordinary behavior at press conferences. And by totally ordinary, I mean he insulted a reporter of CNN for just sort of trying to stir up crap. Now, is that a news story? We got this coronavirus thing, the economy is in trouble. I'm pretty sure we have some real news. But is it news that Trump acted exactly like Trump for the billionth time in a row? Do you know what would be news? Trump not acting like Trump. That would be news. There's some news. What's not news is Trump acting like Trump. All right. So that's meaningless news. It's sort of almost news porn for people who just want to hear bad stuff about Trump. That's fine, but it doesn't have any meaning. You're going to hear lots of stories from people who work at hospitals, and those individual stories will sound like this. It's all chaos. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what they're doing. We're just running around like chickens, and there's so much, and our capacity is crashed. Let me put a big caution on those stories. In every organization that's doing anything big, you could throw a dart into a group of employees, which would be very cruel and dangerous. Don't throw a dart into a group of employees. But if you did, that dart would hit somebody who, when you said, all right, pull the dart out, stop complaining. Tell me what you think about management. What would they say? It's just random organization company doing any big organizational thing. What would random employees say about what's going on? Let me tell you. Management doesn't know what it's doing. It's not communicating. We're running around like chickens with our heads cut off. It's chaos. Nobody can agree. We don't know where we're going. Where's our strategy? Our strategy, said every employee of every organization who's going through any kind of a big reorganization or change or transformation. So you're going to hear all those stories. Listen to the people who are a little closer to the top of the chain to find out what's going on. Because it would be very normal that the people at the bottom don't know what's going on. It would be more concerning if the people in management didn't have a pretty good handle on it, or at least they're trying something and quickly adjusting, which gets you to the same place, a little bit slower than magic bullet, but it's the right process. So don't put too much credibility in low-level staffs, tweeting and getting out messages about how bad things are. Don't ignore them, because they are red flags, right? So if you hear these reports, I think the press should try to contact them and maybe dig in and compare it to what the management is saying and get an independent view. So you should definitely pay attention to them as red flags. But until the press is, to the extent that the press is doing its job, until you get a little more from management, you don't have the picture. That's just a caution that you might hear some alarming stories that might not tell you what's going on. All right. I put out this provocative thought, and I was quite surprised that smart people did not totally reject it. And it's a category I'd have to say I don't understand well enough to have a firm opinion, so I put it in the form of a question, and it went like this. If the government created and issued a government-backed cryptocurrency, so in other words, if the government made its own version of a Bitcoin or some other crypto, and just gave it to everybody who had low income and at least had the capability of having a smartphone and could figure out how to get it and spend it. Now, of course, there are practical issues about who can use a crypto wallet. It's a little complicated, etc. But I just put it out there for the conceptual feedback. And it was interesting. There were people on both sides. So I'm going to stop well short of saying it's a good idea. But I will say that the objections I heard didn't make sense. So there were people who said, no, you can't create a government cryptocurrency because that would cause inflation. To which I said, Bitcoin got created. Did that cause inflation? I don't think so. Did it? Maybe. Didn't notice. Didn't seem to be much of an impact. Now, it could be that even Bitcoin, as big as it is not big enough to cause inflation. But a government crypto, especially used massively like this, maybe it would. But there are a lot of unknowns on this. But I just put it out there because the one thing that cryptocurrency does is it creates money out of nothing. So instead of running up our debt or printing money that could cause inflation, the two ways that you sort of produce money in the normal way, it's just a third way to produce money out of nothing. But it's a little disconnected from the rest of the economy, so I don't know if it would have the same effect. I just put it out there. So that's a question, not a suggestion. But I think at some point there will be it's obvious that at some point the government will have a crypto, right? So if you're going to have one anyway, maybe this is the time to do it. I don't know. You're going to see the death rate for coronavirus falling quickly, especially because of the meds, and also because we'll be doing more testing, so we'll find more people who didn't know they had it. We're getting good news about serum therapy, convalescent serum therapy. Now, those are fancy words for taking the blood from people who have already recovered, taking out the good parts. What's left is in the serum, I guess. So they reduce the blood down to the useful parts and inject it into somebody who doesn't have it yet, or maybe somebody who does have it. I think it could go either way. But it would give them antibodies without them having to develop them themselves. And 91 out of 157 patients treated this way showed clinical improvement within 48 hours. Not bad. Now that's only 91 out of 157. I believe that the chloroquine is getting, and the other drugs in combination, etc., are getting far higher improvement rates than that. But here's another one. Somebody says, read Trump tweet. And before I do that, I'm going to do that right now. Okay, let me just look at Trump's tweets. There must be something going on that's interesting, or you wouldn't have alerted me to that. Trump. One moment, please. Please hold. All right. Oh, well, there we go. 41 minutes ago. Hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin taken together. Remember, this is coming from the president, so this is not a medical person. So hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin taken together have a real chance to be one of the biggest game changers in the history of medicine. The FDA has moved mountains. Thank you. Hopefully they will both. H works better with A, International Journal. In other words, combining those two drugs works better than taking one. To put it in use immediately. People are dying. Move fast and God bless everyone. Let me tell you some behind the scenes information. Now, this is word of mouth. It's hearsay to you, but I know the person and I know the source, etc. But so put it with a grain of salt. But this is something I've heard, which is, was it yesterday? Maybe yesterday morning or the day before. I was asking about the FDA and approval. And what I heard, and again, grain of salt, right? Any anonymous information you want to take with a grain of salt. But what I heard was that Trump was telling the FDA, get it done. And as in, we're not going to wait for you, you're just going to do it. Just frickin' do it. Just make this happen. So I think the president was putting all kinds of pressure on the FDA. Now, is that safe? Has the FDA maybe cut some corners because the president's putting pressure on them? Imagine how much pressure the president of the United States, this one in particular, could put on you if he wants something done and it's a national emergency. Well, that's the kind of pressure that nobody's ever seen. I mean, you've never been in that situation. Will you ever be like the choke point for a national emergency and the most important leader in the entire world, in my opinion, is putting pressure on you to make a decision that's not maybe medically what you wanted to do. There's a little bit of risk there. I'm not going to lie. There's a little bit of risk there. But it's a risk I would have taken based on what I've seen. I'm assuming the president's seeing stuff functionally similar to what we're seeing at this point, meaning that these are so low risk because they're existing drugs, we have some experience with them, and there's such a high gain that the risk reward is just blatantly obvious. And I think the president, especially because you take them for short term, the side effects are more long-term use, but we don't need it long-term. It's sort of a 2 weeks and done situation or less. And I think the president's just completely right. The bureaucracy had to do what the bureaucracy does, but I think he pushed them to act faster than they've ever acted before. And I think the president's optimism will be greatly criticized today. But he said something interesting at the press conference that I hated and loved it at the same time. I had a hate-love relationship with this statement. And the president said that, you never know. He was talking about chloroquine, not the hydroxychloroquine, which is even better. He said, you never know, good indications, but personally, he said he was optimistic. And I thought, well, he might be getting a little bit ahead of the medical people, but I don't think so. So I think he's going to be proven right. And the part that I didn't like, but I liked a little bit, is he said that he's been right a lot. He looks at him and he goes, I think this is going to be really good, and I've been right a lot. Now, when he said it, I thought, well, you don't need to say that. You don't need to say you're right. This isn't sort of the time to keep score. It's a national emergency. But on the other hand, I thought, well, it's kind of true. It's kind of true. All right. When he closed the airport, what did everybody say? Too soon, don't do it. And now they all say he's right. Right. And, you can go down the line. There'll be plenty of stuff for people to complain about, and they will. But he's been right a lot. And in the context of an emergency, what the public wants to know is that the leader's been right a lot. So I liked it because it showed confidence, and the public needs to know he's right a lot. And I think he's actually right about that he's right a lot. I would be the first one to criticize him if I didn't think that was objectively true, but I think it is. So let's talk more about the economy. So I think, like I said, I think that we're going to be sending the young back to work as soon as we have a really, really good handle on the meds. But I wanted to go through a long tweet thread that I sent out yesterday that I tried to capture for people who don't understand economics and haven't sort of lived in that world. I wanted to give you a little framework so you understand what you're seeing and what to worry about and what not to worry about. So I'll just run through this. The first thing you should do is not compare this epidemic to any other epidemic, because it really is its own thing. It's not the Spanish flu, it's not SARS, it's not the regular flu, it's not the common cold, it's just not anything. So the moment that you try to predict the future by comparing it to something, you're already off the rails, because that just doesn't work. So don't compare it to anything. Just know what we know about this and use that. All right. Second thing you need to know is that the economy is a psychology engine. So all of the physical assets, all of the business models are completely intact, and they'll be intact if it's 1 month or 2 months or 3 months or 1 week. That stuff is sort of going to be there waiting, so that's good. Crash here. But if we keep our psychology right, the economy won't crash, because the economy is all about what do you expect tomorrow. Well, I'll invest today because I expect tomorrow people will buy stuff. So expectations and psychology really are the engine, and there are a number of us who are working very hard to keep that psychology intact. You might even say, if you were to describe my job at the moment, and I would say in the crisis, everybody has a job. It's not the one you're paid for, but you'll have a job, You know what your job is, right? Sometimes your job is just to stay out of public. Sometimes your job is to help somebody else. Sometimes your job is you're a medical professional. My job, which I assign to myself based on ability, is to keep the psychology engine intact. And you'll see plenty of smart people who understand economics who are doing the same. If you see somebody who understands economics and is scaring you about what's going to happen, then you should say about them they don't understand economics. Somehow they went to college, got a degree, got on television to talk about economics, but if they're scaring you, they don't understand economics, because economics is fundamentally psychology in the practical world. So I'm going to do what some of them maybe are not doing right yet. Bill Ackman, he's an investor, so you have to be careful of anybody who's made bets on this. So there are people making bets on the downside, bets on the upside, and then there are just some people who are just frightened to death. So I would ignore individuals no matter how talented. I would sort of look for the consensus, because individuals are just going to be scared and or have a bet in the other direction, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't worry about Bill Ackman or any specific person who seems a little frightened. There will be very smart and knowledgeable people who are just frightened. Everybody has a different button, right? The thing that frightens you won't be the thing that frightens me, and vice versa. So you just know that there's a huge individual difference in how frightened people are that is independent from what the world is. So I and people who understand economics as a psychology engine are going to hold this together. We're going to. Because we have the ability, we have the time, I'm not going anywhere, we have the motivation, and we have, if you have ability, time, motivation, and the technology to get it out, you can guarantee that the people who understand this stuff will hold it together. Now, there'll still be plenty of people who are flipping out, but on the whole, people like me and people who have the calmer voices and understand how economics work, we will hold this together. You just have to listen to us, and you can do that right now. Now, keep in mind that we don't know if $1 trillion aid or $2 trillion is the right amount. Experts disagree, and if experts disagree, what do you and I have to say about it, really? Except this. If you had a choice between approving $2 trillion or $1 trillion, which is the right decision? Mathematically, hard to tell, because there's a cost for doing too much and there's a cost for doing too little, and we can't predict either one. And yet, there is a right answer, and it looks like this. You have to go with the big number. If the big number is out there, you got to take it. In the same way that when President Trump said, well, we might need $2.5 billion, and the Democrats said, how about something like $9 billion? Because we've been here before, it's going to be more expensive than you think. Whoever says the biggest number wins in an emergency, all right? So for confidence and for the engine of the economy, which is psychology, there is one right answer, and it's the big number. But because there's a risk with the big number, there's a way to game this. You announce approval of the big number, and then at the same time you announce that you're going to use half of it and then reevaluate. You win. Because we'll probably be smarter, in a few weeks, and we'll know if that second half, that $2 trillion is critical or not. But if you announce the whole $2 trillion, people say, okay, thank God they're not being stingy. Thank goodness they're going for the big number. Thank goodness they took it seriously. And then you still just approve for immediate release the smaller number. And the big one's just waiting. It's already approved. So that can get out in a few days. So the smart way to play this is to approve the big number. The psychology engine of economics stays intact as best it can. And then you still monitor it as you go so you can pull back when you need to. Next, the human ingenuity that's being concentrated on this thing. I feel like we're not only going to get past this, I feel like we're going to cure the common cold. Now, that might be a little hyperbole, But the amount we're going to learn about dealing with, all of the pandemic situation is tremendous. And I think the human ingenuity, we're seeing it already. I mean, in every possible way, from the medical community to economics, you are seeing ingenuity like I've never witnessed, not even close. I have to think that in World War II, there was a similar, explosion of ingenuity because you just had to. You just had to figure out how to live when everything was getting blown up. But in my life, since I didn't live through World War II, I've never seen this degree of human ingenuity. It's breathtaking, and we'll be talking about that for decades. And I like to say it this way: ask Warren Buffett how smart it is to bet against the U.S. economy, because people are looking at the economy and say, some people think it'll come back, some people think it'll go lower, some people just it'll all disappear and we'll all be an agrarian society. But Warren Buffett has a pretty good track record. And I haven't seen him talk about this recently, but do you think Warren Buffett is betting against the U.S. economy? Nope. I'll bet he's not, because he never has, and I'll bet he never will. So if Warren Buffett, and here I'm just speculating because he hasn't said anything, but he's never bet against the U.S. economy, and I think you could take some comfort from that. Even now, there's no way he's going to bet against it. Next, you can count on the people who have money, the people who got through the virus crisis intact financially. You can count on them to go back hard and spend. I'm going to commit right now that the moment I can leave the house, I'm just going to be raining cash on my local economy. I'm going to eat out as much as Christina wants to go out to dinner. I'm going to buy stuff locally. I'm just going to spray money into the local economy. I'm pretty sure that anybody who has the ability to do the same is going to be thinking in those terms, if only because they have a lot of pent-up demand. They've been home too long. So that's good. The biggest economic variable after the virus itself is what's going to happen because of it. What things do you change because we went through this experience? And the biggest thing, obviously, is the supply chain. There's no doubt anymore that we'll be decoupling from China. How many of you a year ago, when I was saying decouple from China, how many of you thought to yourself, good luck, Scott, but that's not going to happen because that's just crazy. The China-U.S. trade is just so big and so important, we're not going to decouple. Slowly, quickly, we're just not going to do it. It's too important. A year ago, that just sounded crazy, didn't it? Decouple from China. What do you think now? What do you think now? Well, now you think it's guaranteed. So when I say it's guaranteed, I don't mean we'll stop doing business with China. I don't mean that. I mean that you're not going to see much new going there. You're definitely going to see the critical businesses come back, pharmaceuticals, etc. And I would recommend that become a cabinet level job. I think we need a cabinet level, doesn't have to be a cabinet, but a cabinet level position to do nothing but repatriate our supply chain because it's now a critical, defensive situation. So I think that's going to happen. That's guaranteed, and that'll be tremendous for the economy. I think businesses that were profitable before the virus will have no problems getting bank credit to go back to work. If you're a bank, the very best loan you want to give somebody is for a good business that you know is good. It's been in business 20 years, and they've got a temporary shortfall of cash for an identifiable problem that's already been fixed. Oh my God. If you're a banker, and by the way, I used to be a bank lender. I used to make loans to businesses in my early days. If you're a bank lender, you never get to see that. Well, sometimes you do, but it's your favorite kind of loan. Your favorite loan is the business that's already proved it can make money, had one problem, needed a little cash to just get through, and they've already solved the problem. You can't get better than that. That's your best loan right there. So banks are going to be having a heyday. The big good businesses will come back reliably. The weak businesses may close, but maybe they were going to anyway, if you know what I mean. If you're new to following me, I should mention that I have a degree in economics and an MBA. If anybody is just popping on here to watch the cartoonist talk, and I'm talking about economics, you're saying to yourself, well, that doesn't make sense. Why am I listening to an artist about economics? But I do have some background in this stuff. And here's something else you should have confidence in. Me. We're going to get through this. And I will guarantee you that the psychology of our economic engine will stay strong. Strong enough. It's going to take a hit, but strong enough. And I'm dedicated full time to that. I mean, I'm going to be talking about all the topics related around it. I'm not going to be focusing on the economy. But there are smart people who have your back, and they're going to keep the psychology right. We're going to keep the focus in the right places. We're going to make sure the press is doing its job, and we're going to have a continuous pipeline of advice and feedback to our government. I said this before, but I just need to say this every time it happens because you don't see it happening and I do. I have experienced, 8 times in the last few days, probably 8 different times, I've seen something that I thought would be useful for the government to know. In some cases, it's people putting together factories and they need the government to know they're building something that would help. In some cases, it's information, etc. But in 8 different occasions, I sent an idea up the line and heard confirmation that it reached the White House, meaning the actual staff that would make the decisions on it, in hours. And sometimes less than an hour, sometimes less than 1 hour. A good idea or an input would go all the way up to the very committee in the government that cares about it, and I would give feedback right away. And sometimes it meant introducing some people and doing some things. Now, I'm just one person. I don't know how many people are interacting with their government, but I got to tell you, our form of government tends toward bureaucracy in normal times. And in normal times, it's just hard to get stuff done. Let's admit it. Your government just builds, layers and layers of complexity until it's just hard to get anything done. But in the emergency, that's all gone. It is all gone. There is no friction between somebody who wants to help and has a good idea and your government. They have just become one entity. The public and the government, we're not even different people anymore. It used to be there's the government and then there's people. We just did this. Whoop. Government and people. Same team, same objective, eye on the ball, everything. So we're going to get this done. So here's what you look for. Look for your government to say that they're considering a phased approach to coming back. And it will be based on having pop-up tents and extra capacity for the mildly sick people who went back to work maybe, got it, took some pills, rested at home until they were good to go. So everything is trending in exactly the way you want. It will look worse. If there's anything that you need to know in the next week, maybe 2 weeks, the economy is going to look really bad. It's supposed to. That means that our strategy of moving up to the line is getting close to the line. And when we get close, will be about the same time that we have enough of the meds and enough pop-up tents to give them out. And then it's back to work, people, in a phased way. And if you don't own stocks, then, honestly, I'd feel bad for you. And I have to be very careful here. I do not take financial advice from cartoonists. But honestly, I'd feel sorry for you if you didn't own stocks and the president said, we're looking at a phased approach to putting people back to work, based on health and availability of this medicine. That's coming. In the next 2 weeks, the president of the United States is going to stand in front of the country and say, some of you are going back to work. And here's why. And you're going to feel a lot better. So my job is to keep the psychology of the economy strong until that day the president stands in front of you and says, some people are going back to work. We're going to be careful, but we're starting now. So there's your good news for the day. I will try to get back with you later today. But you should trust that good, well-meaning, capable people are all over this. And we'll pull you through. You're going to be great. Talk to you later.